Well, I want to gavel in, and I want to say good afternoon to the Administrator Zeldin. I would have come down to shake your hand, but we're running a little behind, and in consideration, I'll just wave to you, and thank you for being here. I appreciate your time and willingness to appear before the committee, as always. Over the last year, we have sent a clear change. We have seen a clear change in the direction of EPA, one that is grounded in EPA's authorizing statutes and recognizes the importance of reliable, affordable energy. That change matters no matter where you live, in what state, and certainly no different from my state of West Virginia. In November, thank you very much. During your visit to West Virginia, you heard firsthand about the real economic benefits that are resulting from the regulatory relief efforts in Congress and with the Trump administration. Administrator Zeldin, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to my constituents and understand how the policies and actions that occur here in Washington directly impact the livelihoods of those in the Mountain State. For too long, EPA policies imposed unnecessary and costly burdens on American workers, farmers, manufacturers, energy producers, and communities. We saw rules that drove power plants and coal mines towards closure, raised costs for families, and ignored the plain realities of our electric grid. The EPA buried the economy in red tape and killed economic growth. So that's changing. The EPA is now working hard to undo point by point the Biden administration's war on coal and other matters. The EPA proposal to repeal the Biden administration Clean Power Plan 2.0 rule, an unworkable and unlawful rule that would have forced the shutdown of coal plants and prohibited new gas plants. It would have been devastated our electrical reliability by causing major electricity generation shortages. I encourage the EPA to finalize that rule's repeal. The agency also extended compliance deadlines for the effluent limitations guidelines and repealed the Biden-era MATS rule. These were unnecessary Biden rules with unrealistic timelines that would have forced power plants to shut down rather than continue to operate efficiently and in compliance with our environmental laws. This year, the EPA rescinded the 2009 endangerment finding. That finding was wrongfully used to justify sweeping rules that Congress never authorized and that imposed hundreds of billions of dollars of costs on our economy. Rescinding it is a momentous milestone in returning the EPA to adhering to its statutory role. The costly regulatory regime of the endangerment finding supported was inconsistent with the requirement of clear congressional authority that the Supreme Court found was necessary for such actions in the decision in West Virginia versus the EPA. The EPA's work is not limited just to the power sector. After Administrator Zeldin sent the Biden-era California waiver to Congress, we repealed the Democrats' attempt to enact a nationwide electric vehicle mandate without a vote in Congress. With that vote, Congress preserved consumer choice and protected our constituents from government-mandated higher vehicle costs. Finally, Administrator Zeldin is bringing real accountability for how our taxpayers' dollars are being spent. The Inflation Reduction Act created a bunch of wasteful programs at EPA that funded climate spending with little actual environmental benefit, such as for activists' pet projects, and even funded activists to more easily sue the government to stop permits and projects. Two programs were of particular concern: $30 billion that went to the so-called Green Bank and environmental justice block grant programs. Billions of dollars went out the door with limited transparency and questionable oversight. The EPA's action to cancel roughly $17 billion of those grants was an important first step for Congress to build upon, which we did in the Working Family Tax Cut Bill. The EPW committee's title of that bill took the final step to repeal the Green Bank and rescind those canceled grant funds, as well as millions of dollars from other IRA programs, clawing them back to the United States Treasury on behalf of the American taxpayers. The EPA, under Administrator Zeldin's leadership, is delivering real results to benefit West Virginians and the American people, but there's still much work to be done. We need to assure that the EPA's bipartisan foundational programs, like the Drinking Water and Clean Water State Revolving Funds, are adequately funded. These programs are how communities, especially small and rural communities, replace aging pipes, update treatment systems, and ensure safe, reliable service. We also need to ensure that programs and processes are well established to strengthen economic competitiveness, by approving new innovative chemicals and cleaning up environmental brownfield sites. Administrator Zeldin, I appreciate the steps your agency has taken so far. I look forward to hearing how you plan to build on that progress, how you're prioritizing EPA's core responsibilities, and how we can continue working together to support American energy and American jobs. So I now recognize Ranking Member Whitehouse for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman. The point of science isn't to have an opinion, it's to make a prediction. Science is society's headlights, predicting what's ahead. What science has unequivocally shown for decades, EPA's recent efforts to dismantle and distort science notwithstanding, is that fossil fuel emissions are disrupting Earth's basic operating systems in increasingly dangerous ways. As ocean and weather systems go haywire, all the fossil fuel-funded faux science will count for naught. Indeed, it will inevitably be exposed as fraud. Climate change is moving from the science department to the economics department. So the first hits coming are economic hits from industries that must truthfully predict how climate change will affect their businesses. One industry that has to predict well is the insurance industry, for both fiduciary and business reasons. Climate risk is blasting insurance markets and melting down homeowners insurance. Florida is first and worst. 64% of voters in Florida understand their home insurance crisis relates to climate change. Even 44% of Trump voters in Florida understand that. Home insurance costs are exploding. Insurers are leaving customers. In some cases, they're leaving whole states and regions. And predictions are that the cascade goes from climate risk to insurance collapse, to mortgage collapse, to property values collapsing, to full-on recession. Already, Florida leads the nation in property value decline. Every increased premium, every notice of non-renewal, every customer dumped into a state plan ties back to the fossil fuel industry's twinned operations of climate denial fraud and dark money corruption, operating through dozens of front groups which have blockaded efforts to reduce the underlying climate risk that is driving that whole cascade. Even though they knew, they deployed fraud and corruption to blockade. Another cost going up for consumers is electricity bills. This is driven in part by the fossil fuel industry's plot to subvert the powers of government to keep inexpensive clean energy off the grid. Ask any grid operator. Inexpensive clean energy runs first on the grid because it's inexpensive. As demand climbs, the grid then goes to more and more expensive fossil fuel plants, which raise and raise the grid price, and consumer costs go up and up. The point of the industry plan is to raise consumer costs by reducing clean energy, sending those extra billions consumers must spend to fossil fuel plants and fossil fuel producers. It's a money pump, deliberately extracting money from consumers and sending it to Trump's big corrupt fossil fuel donors. The Trump administration persistently lies about the added cost. That's part of what the fossil fuel industry paid for. Administrator Zeldin himself has said, for example, that the wind and solar industries would not exist without government subsidies. But that's simply not true. Coal and gas are more expensive per megawatt hour than wind and solar, even with their $700+ billion of free-to-pollute subsidy that fossil fuel gets from the US government. $700 billion of subsidy every year. Well, grid operators don't lie. They run grids based on cost. You can see who's less expensive. Or you can take a look at the contracts. Offshore wind will cost 9 cents per kilowatt hour in our 18-cent per kilowatt hour average cost grid. Do the math. 9 is less than 18. 4-year-olds know that. And yet the administration lies. Administrator Zeldin has played a huge part in delivering this payback to Trump's fossil fuel donors. Payback in the form of policies driving dirtier air and water, worsening climate change and extreme weather, and driving higher costs for consumers in the form of ever higher property insurance premiums and electricity bills. From attempting to kill clean energy programs, to handing out pollute-for-free passes to fossil fuel power plants, to saddling Americans with increasingly unaffordable gas guzzlers, Zeldin has executed the fossil fuel industry's agenda. A massive reckoning is coming. Those who sold out for position and power, and presumably to be taken care of afterwards by the big polluters, those who lied to the public, those who chose to support the industry's interest over the public interest, those who drove consumer costs up on purpose to reward big political Trump donors, all that will be exposed. It is inevitable. It is nature's way. Indeed, it's already begun. All the climate denial fraud that you helped propagate, all the corrupt dark money your polluter bosses sluice through this building, none of that will stand against nature's reckoning, a reckoning that is inevitable as a sunrise. We ignore at our own peril the fact that these natural systems, nature's own economy, provide the foundation for our prosperity and our national security. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. This afternoon, we are joined by the Honorable Lee Zeldin, who's the Administrator of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. I look forward to hearing from Administrator Zeldin about the agency's proposed multi-billion-dollar budget for the fiscal year 2027 and how he plans to build upon the programs and policies that ensure the core mission of the EPA is executed. So, Mr. Administrator, thank you for being here. But before we move to your testimony, I'll administer the oath to receive your sworn testimony. If you would rise, please. And raise your right hand and answer the following question. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give to this committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Let the record show that the witness answered in the affirmative, so we will now proceed. Administrator Zeldin, you are now recognized for your opening statement. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chairman Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the President's fiscal year 2027 budget request for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I would like to take a moment to thank many of you for supporting the confirmation of EPA's leadership team who have wasted no time enacting President Trump's agenda and helping to power the great American comeback. Marking 1 year of President Trump being back in office, EPA announced over 500 environmental wins in that first year. We've made enormous strides to tackle the decades-long Tijuana River sewage crisis that's affected San Diego area communities. We're getting lead out of drinking water across the country. And we're proving you don't have to choose between a strong economy and a clean environment. This great work is just a fraction of what EPA accomplishes on a daily basis as we continue to fulfill our core mission of protecting human health and the environment. There are Democrats on this dais who want the EPA to govern in left-wing fantasy, pursuing their agenda to destroy entire sectors of our economy. At the Trump EPA, we govern in reality. We are committed to supporting more baseload power sources in this country to meet this moment and unleash energy dominance. I fulfilled a commitment I made during my confirmation to visit all 50 states as EPA administrator. And I completed that effort in just 9.5 months. During those visits, I learned how EPA's policies, rules, and regulations impacted farmers, small business owners, and our energy providers. It was exciting to often witness in my travels groundbreaking after groundbreaking, seeing firsthand the projects that are underway to unleash energy dominance, grow our economy, and power the artificial intelligence revolution. During my visits, I asked, how can we help, and where do we need to get out of the way? Everywhere I heard we need certainty and consistency. The Trump EPA is committed to bringing down costs for American families by ending the whiplash of the radical climate agenda. The Supreme Court's overturning of the Chevron doctrine made it clear that agencies like EPA no longer have the freedom to creatively bend the law to fulfill the demands of unelected bureaucrats. This paved the way to our greatest deregulatory achievement yet, the rescission of the 2009 endangerment finding. For 16 years, the endangerment finding has been the source of consumer choice restrictions and trillions of dollars of hidden costs piled onto Americans. This single decision lessens the federal government's harmful grip over our economy, saving over $1 trillion and bringing down the cost of new vehicles. In November, EPA rolled out a proposed rule that would establish a clear, durable, common-sense definition of waters of the United States, faithfully abiding by the Supreme Court's decision in Sackett. Democrat administrations have weaponized the definition of navigable waters to seize more power from American farmers, landowners, entrepreneurs, and families. We heard from Americans across the country who want clean water and a clear rule. No longer should America's landowners be forced to spend precious money hiring an attorney or consultant just to tell them whether a water of the United States is on their property. As we work to protect human health and the environment, grow our economy, and restore America's energy dominance, EPA has taken several actions to bolster domestic energy production. In February, we took steps to end Democrats' war on coal by repealing the Biden administration's overly burdensome 2024 mercury and air toxic standards. The rule imposed massive costs and red tape on coal and oil-fired plants, driving up the cost of living for American families, jeopardizing our grid reliability and national security, and limiting American energy and manufacturing dominance. Having reliable energy production not only provides lower costs for American families, but ensures national security. The President's FY27 budget will continue to make EPA efficient and effective stewards of Americans' hard-earned tax dollars and fulfill our statutory obligations and our core mission. This budget proposal captures significant efficiencies and a return focus on what Congress has directed us to do, demonstrating our commitment to a leaner, more efficient, and accountable EPA, focused on environmental work that directly benefits the American people. The budget supports and aligns with President Trump's goal of right-sizing the federal workforce with a staff not one more or less than what is necessary. We will continue working each and every day to deliver an EPA that works to empower the American people while protecting our nation's air, land, and water. I look forward to answering all of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will start the questioning. Thank you for being here. And, all the comments this far has talked about the urgent need to generate more electricity. The past administration's power sector strategy was to shut down baseload energy availabilities, and our nation is facing an energy scarcity. People talk about it all the time and know that it is a reality. This strategy consisted of a half dozen rules at EPA, including Clean Power Plan 2.0, that went beyond the agency's regulatory authority, which you've addressed. Will you discuss your efforts to repeal the Biden EPA power sector strategy and how that will lead to more affordable, reliable electricity while continuing to protect public health and welfare?
Well, thank you, Chairman. What we saw, especially towards the end of the Biden administration, was an attack with many rules seeking to strangulate coal out of existence, telling your coal miners that they should just learn to code. We understand how important coal is to your state and many other states up here on this dais. The 2024 mercury and air toxic standards have been repealed. We still have the strict 2012 standards that were working and have significantly reduced mercury and other emissions. We are working to repeal Clean Power Plan 2.0 efforts with regards to steam electric, ELG, coal combustion residuals, giving primacy to states on the handling of CCR. As I mentioned, with our new Waters of the United States rule, with our new Water Reuse Action Plan 2.0, and more, we are rolling back that attack that we saw on coal and other sources of power.
And if I could here, I think it's important to emphasize at this point that the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act written by Congress, all of what you're doing here falls within the boundaries of what we have directed you to do. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. In the Working Families Tax Cut we signed into law, we repealed Section 134 of the Clean Air Act to eliminate the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. I think it was $17 billion. It is in litigation right now, and I was curious to know, we supported the grant cancellations through the passage of the Working Families Tax Cut. Total waste of money. These are unobligated. Well, I understand there's legislation pending. If the courts affirm that Congress has rescinded the $17 billion, do you commit to quickly returning these funds to the United States Treasury?
Enthusiastically.
Thank you. I want to talk about PFAS. You and I have talked about this before. You know, it's a concern I have. It's a concern around the country. And we haven't been able to really reach a congressional a point at which we can agree here as to how we might be helpful. Under CERCLA, as strict guidance and their retroactive liability structure, we're not sure that the passive receivers, that would be small water companies, it could be ag people, it could be anybody else who's sharing water resources. There's a concern that they may be on the hook to pay for any kind of cleanup. While we work for a solution, can you tell me what EPA has done? I know you have several authorities and existing settlement and allocation tools under CERCLA. Are you using those authorities? How are you using them, and how successful have they been?
We believe strongly that the polluter should pay, and that the ratepayer shouldn't be on the hook for cleaning up PFAS contamination of their own water supply. We had a choice as to whether or not to pursue CERCLA or RCRA. Neither of these two laws were written with PFAS in mind. And unfortunately, the cost of cleanup is passed down from that water system. There are thousands across this country who would be giving it to their ratepayers. So we look forward to being able to work with Congress to be able to address this issue with regards to CERCLA. We have been in contact with stakeholders. There isn't a liability settlement that I'm here to report on, and a congressional solution would certainly be ideal to address the passive receiver status.
The other thing we're working on is the safe drinking water, which involves the state revolving funds. All of our states, particularly those of us that have still small and remaining rural communities that don't have satisfactory service. They're limited in their financing options. It's very difficult. This is a critical program for them. Will you commit to working with states to implement all funding that Congress provides from the SRFs in future authorizations and appropriations?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Whitehouse.
I'm going to let Senator Sanders proceed first because he has a scheduling issue, so I'll swap with him.
Before we go to Senator Sanders, really quick, sorry, Senator, I'd like UC request for submission for the record, an article written by the Washington Post, EPA's right to reverse Obama overreach. Another UC request for submission of the record, Wall Street Journal, article, Climate Regulation Liberation Day, the Trump EPA moves to appeal Obama-Biden endangerment finding. And lastly, unanimous consent to enter in the record an article, Real Clear Energy, America's Power Needs Coal and Common Sense.
Without objection.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Zeldin, thanks very much for being with us. I want to focus on one issue. I'm glad that you mentioned your desire to bring down costs in America. Unfortunately, you have not been succeeding. Costs are going up in many aspects of our economy, especially in terms of electricity rates. As you know, all over the country, people are paying higher and higher electric bills. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that, but one of the possible solutions is for us to make certain that low-income and working-class people have solar panels on their rooftops. As you well know, when one has solar panels on a rooftop, we can reduce electric rates by 70, 80, 90%. It is a big deal. Not to mention that it takes carbon emissions out of the atmosphere and helps us address climate change. All right? As part of the Inflation Reduction Act, I got a provision in there called Solar for All. I suspect you're familiar with that. It's a $7 billion program which would reduce electric rates over a period of years for millions of low-income and working-class people rather substantially. Unfortunately, and I think illegally, the Trump administration rescinded that legislation. So what I'm asking you right now, you talk about lowering costs, we need to put solar panels on rooftops. If you're concerned about climate change, we got to cut carbon emissions. Will you work with me to make sure that that $7 billion for Solar for All, and by the way, the grants that have come into the EPA, as you probably know, are from dozens and dozens of states, Republican states, Democratic states. All over this country, people want lower electric rates. They want to protect the environment. That's what that bill does. Will you work with me to make sure that that $7 billion actually is funded and gets out to the states?
Senator, the issue is that Congress has rescinded the entirety of that program, as well as rescinding the money for EPA to be able to oversee the program. Now, if Congress was to pass this again in the future, we will then do our job to get the money out. But no, we'll respect the decision that Congress made last summer in repealing it.
You're suggesting that the big, so-called big, beautiful bill repealed it. Is that what you're suggesting?
Not only did it rescind the account, it also rescinded the account for us to oversee.
Okay, first of all, it did not rescind Solar for All. And if you're sitting here telling us that when we have a program that could lower electric rates for millions of people, help clean up the environment, that you can't find a small amount of money to provide oversight to this program, I think that's not quite credible, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Senator, we don't share this concern, but what I was really concerned about when I came in was I found that the way that the Solar for All program was going to be implemented was that they were going to have the money go through up to 4 different pass-throughs, where each of the pass-through entity was going to collect at least 15%. So the dollar that you think was appropriated to be spent on the back end had to go through up to 4 pass-throughs where they're each diluting it. Just so from a standpoint of being fiscally good stewards, if we ignored the fact that Congress rescinded the program, if we ignored the fact that they rescinded the money to oversee the program, I would hope that we would be equally offended by the fact that the money was getting raided. Good, and then the answer would be that you would come in and chat with me as the author of the bill, say, Bernie, how do we make it more efficient? We don't want to waste money on administration. I hate bureaucracy, as a matter of fact. That's not what you did. You took away the opportunity of millions of people to see lower electric rates. I hope that we can work together to bring that back. You want to make the program more efficient? Come on in, let's chat about it. Is that something you could do? Senator, I would be happy to sit down and talk to you about the program and what we found with the inefficiencies of it. But what we also can't ignore is the fact that as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill, the Working Families Tax Cut, they rescinded
They did not.
the $7 billion.
That's just absolutely inaccurate. And, all right, thank you very much.
Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Administrator, for being here. I have to go back to some of the comments that Senator Whitehouse made. While I think true, I think a little incomplete. So I want to ask you a couple of questions about the preference of renewables on the grid because of their low marginal nearly net zero marginal costs per kilowatt hour. I think you even used the number 9 cents out of the average 18 cents. Do those, and I know you're not the rate maker, but I think you understand this stuff, and I'm wondering if his 9 cents, do you think that includes the 2.3 cents per kilowatt hour subsidy that the taxpayers pay for a production tax credit, or does it include, do you think, the 30% investment tax credit that the utility or the producer had to invest before they could even generate this zero cost energy? Do you think those prices include that?
Respectfully, Senator Whitehouse's math is extremely wrong.
Well, it may be right in terms of what and what he's including, but I don't believe it includes all these other high costs by taxpayers, who, by the way, are also ratepayers. See, we spend a lot of time talking about rates, but not real time talking about costs, because near as I can tell, taxpayers are ratepayers as well. Okay, how about this? Do you think that it also includes, or does it leave out the additional investment that a utility has to invest to back up the wind when it doesn't blow the other 70% of the time? In other words, you have to have a backup that's more reliable. Do you think it includes, does his math include those costs that ratepayers pay?
There's no way to explain his math.
Okay, well, sticking with this preference on the grid thing. Again, net zero, marginal costs, you'd be crazy if you didn't put it on the grid first, if you're already stuck with all the investment costs and the taxpayer costs and all of those things. And so that I understand. And that's part of the rate structure. But isn't it true that there are regions and states that add regulatory or legal mandates that require the less reliable energy to be on the grid first before they then go to the much more reliable extra cost electricity that goes on the grid?
Senator, it is not a coincidence that the 10 states that have the cheapest rates across the country voted for President Trump, and 9 of the 10 with the highest rates voted for Kamala Harris. That's not a coincidence.
Yeah. Well, as a former rate maker, let me tell you, I know this topic pretty well, and I think if we're going to have an honest discussion, we have to put all the costs on the table. All right, that said, let's get back to orders for just a minute. First of all, thank you and to your team for having the first listening session on Waters of the United States out in the Prairie Pothole region of North Dakota, and I think there was a lot of great feedback. One of the things that was interesting to me that I did not expect, frankly, at that listening session was when one of the president of the Home Builders Association testified after a question that the surveying and studies that they've done show that the cost of a lot due to the waters of the United States in certain areas increased $25,000 per lot for a home before a shovel went into it. Now, does that not seem like a cost issue or an inflationary issue that could certainly have been relieved by a better rule?
Absolutely. There are landowners, farmers, ranchers, there are entire states who have come to us, they've done the math, and the impact of the way the waters of the United States was defined previously results in a heavy cost to be able to hire an attorney or a consultant to tell them whether it was a water of the United States. And that great uncertainty has caused a lot of issues across the country, and that's what we're working to fix.
So while you're working to fix it in the remaining seconds, maybe give us an update on that exactly. I know that one of the things I hear, a couple of things I hear a lot about from people about the proposed rule is terms like significant nexus, a wet season are a little bit vague and probably similar to federal nexus. Can you give me an update on definitions and the process, and is there a way we can sort of tighten some of that language up?
We have been going through all of the public comments, grateful for everyone across the country who participated in the process. We encourage the public to participate when we go out to the public comment, and that included Waters of the United States. And we've heard this feedback and much more, and we are incorporating it.
White House.
Mr. Zeldin, my colleagues around this table are closing in on election in which the Trump administration's household cost catastrophe will be central. And you have been on a polluter-funded rampage to increase Americans' costs. Stuff should cost less. You are making lots of stuff cost lots more. You have raised costs for Americans. You have done so to steer their money to your big polluters. Your attack on clean energy raises costs for consumers, but it sends billions to your fossil fuel polluters, Trump's big donors. Trump's attack on offshore wind stalled 9 cents per kilowatt hour power, contract number, no math, getting to my constituents who work in an 18-cent average kilowatt hour grid. Every single day that 9-cent power was delayed, steered money from consumers' pockets into the pockets of expensive natural gas units, units that the clean offshore wind energy would have displaced. You will at least concede that 9 cents is less than 18 cents, will you not?
Well, 9 cents is less than 18 cents.
There you
However,
go.
in this
Thank you.
context,
Your rampant climate
math is
denial
accurate.
and refusal to address climate
Your
risk
math is inaccurate. Would
is
you like to talk
driving
about it?
home insurance rates skyward, setting new records in states like Iowa, Florida, and Texas. Those costs are cascading from a home insurance crisis into a mortgage crisis, into a property values crisis. But the big winners, getting to pollute for free, are your fossil fuel polluters, Trump's big donors. Is EPA looking at all at Florida's climate-driven insurance crisis?
So to be clear, everything about the 9 cents, all you want to ask me is
I have
whether
a new
9
question
cents is
now.
less
Go
than
to the next
18
question.
cents. No, I just that I'm understanding. This
Okay,
is
if you don't
really
want to
important
answer my
issue to
question,
you.
I'll move on to the next one.
If I'm
Your
tracking
attack on
right,
fuel efficiency
all you want to know that
standards-
9 cents is less than 18 cents. You don't want to actually
Already
talk
answered
about
that.
the issue.
You already answered that. Now you're just wasting my time.
Now
Your attack
everything
on
other
fuel
than
efficiency
9 is less than
standards
18 is
will
wasting your
drive
time?
up the cost of Americans' gasoline budgets. Your own regulatory impact analysis put the net loss to consumers at $180 billion, but with a minimum $580 billion bonus for big oil at the pump. All those billions go to your fossil fuel polluters, Trump's big donors. Those are your numbers, Mr. Zeldin. You also made it easier to pollute with soot, which will cost Americans tens of billions in added healthcare costs, all to save about $600 million in compliance costs for your fossil fuel polluters, Trump's big donors. You stopped EPA even counting health harms in your cost-benefit analysis, didn't you?
I'm still stuck on the fact that all you're asking me
All
so
right, you're not
far
gonna ask
about
that question-
any of
you're
your
not gonna
numbers
answer
is
that
that
question
9 is
either.
less than 18.
You attacked the
You wanna talk
greenhouse
about
gas
what an
reduction
LCOE
fund.
is?
I get
Do you
the
know?
time here. I get to ask the questions. You attacked the greenhouse gas reduction fund, potentially costing consumers $52 billion in lost energy savings, let alone the health benefits of cleaner air. But that $52 billion consumers lose will flow where? To your fossil fuel polluters, Trump's big donors. Ditto the Solar for All funding that you attacked, trying to strip Americans of $350 million per year in expected energy savings, billions over time. Those lost savings go where? To your fossil fuel polluters, Trump's big donors. You even set up a special polluter email address that gave polluters a drive-up window for exemptions from the Clean Air Act, helping them keep 70 polluting coal plants online. One estimate is that just 6 of those plants have already cost ratepayers an extra $230 million in costs in less than 1 year. And indeed, one plant in Michigan has already cost Michiganders $600 million in excess health costs. That is money out of consumers' pockets and into the pockets of your fossil fuel polluters, Trump's big donors.
Can we talk
Are
about your
you
math
even
yet?
tracking the consumer cost of those coal plants?
We're going to get to talk about math.
Are you even tracking the consumer costs of those coal plants?
Oh, no, this is great. So I don't even know where to start with all of the messed up
Answer that
math.
question. Are you even tracking
Of
the
course.
consumer costs of those
Yeah,
coal
yeah,
plants?
and costs are going down across the country when you look at EPA's
Where
impacts.
are you tracking the consumer costs of those coal plants?
When you look
Where
at
EPA is
are you
tracking
kidding me? The coal plants even staying open? You think that the math is it's better for West Virginia if you close down their coal plants and put these people out of work and tell them to learn to code? According to
think that when you put
in your
a coal
mind,
plant
that's
on
saving West
that
Virginia?
is raising
Is
costs.
it saving them on energy
We
access?
know it's raising costs.
Is it saving them on jobs?
You can talk across me all you like. You are raising costs.
Raising
You're
costs.
raising costs on purpose because the money that you get when you raise costs from consumers goes to Trump's big fossil fuel
don't
donors.
close down
My time is
coal.
up.
Not sure we're going to get anywhere with that. We'll go to Mr. Curtis.
I would desperately like to change the subject, but Administrator Zeldin, let me just ask you in a very quick answer. If we had a magic wand and we waved it and we unplugged every single fossil fuel source across our planet now, give me 30 seconds to what the world would look like.
I'd tell you for us, domestically, it would be absolutely devastating. And fortunately, we don't have to be naive to the math that Senator Whitehouse is using. He likes to look at a levelized cost of entry. He's not factoring in firming. He's not looking at the ISO's net cost of new energy. And when you factor in firming and all the additional costs, they start skyrocketing. And you realize that all sorts of access to fossil fuels that they rail against are actually cheaper. Whether it's the gas combined cycle, whether you're talking about the gas that's already online, the nuclear that is already online. He wants to use a very small number to say that wind is the cheapest and solar is the cheapest, and he wants to ignore all of the firming costs. His math is screwed up. For the rest of this country, as we saw through many, many weeks of very cold temperatures, thank God that people, when the sun stops shining, when the wind stops blowing, and when it's freezing over the course of that winter, that they had access to reliable, durable baseload power. And thank you to the Republicans on this dais for your advocacy and your application of reality to make sure that all of these Americans are able to stay warm, because they would have been in a really screwed up position if they were following Senator Whitehouse's approach towards jamming everyone with wind and solar and putting away all their access to reliable baseload power.
I would take an hour of this, but I get 5 minutes, so I'm going to shift your gears just a little bit. First of all, when you mentioned you'd been to 50 states, I was surprised because I know you came to Utah. If you spent as much time in all 50 states and got into issues as much as you did in Utah, that is outstanding. Thank you for your visit. Thank you for meeting with my legislators and for the good work you've done there. As you know, part of our challenge in Utah is this atmospheric conditions that we have that just make us unique and different. We've made, I would suggest, more changes to improve air quality than any other state, but just the rules of the game have been problematic for us. So thank you for your involvement in that. Now, if I could just switch issues just real quickly. The 2027 budget justification prioritizes the review of new chemicals, PMNs. I appreciate your goal, literally a goal of conducting risk assessments and making affirmative determinations on more than 500 new chemicals. I think that would be about 499 more than the last administration, maybe even 500, so thank you for that. Can you walk us through the steps the EP is taking to meet that goal? It's an aggressive goal, including case discussion meetings within 30 days of receiving the request, and how investments in AI and other innovation have been helping you?
Well, on that front, I want to thank Congress, appropriated $17 million in March of 2025 to upgrade IT inside of that office. When the systems go down for weeks at a time, everything is stopping, and then you have a backlog that starts increasing. We inherited a new chemicals backlog of about 500 or so. We did 58 new PMNs just in the first 3 months of this year. On top of that, when we did our agency reorganization last year, we increased the amount of FTEs, the amount of scientists inside of the Office of Chemical Safety. That reorganization and the streamlining of the process, the efficiencies that have been added have allowed us to, for example, get those 58 new PMNs done. We project that we will do more PMNs in 2026 than each of the last 5 years prior.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to point out that the impact that program has on innovation, pushing jobs, if we don't do it, push those jobs offshore, plus the fact that many of these chemicals are actually far better for the environment. When we don't get them approved, we're forcing companies to use these chemicals that we know are worse for the environment. Can you also elaborate on, I know part of this is communicating with the submitters. So talk to me about the process that we're improving of communicating with the submitters to make it smoother for them, more predictable in their review process.
Well, sure. One of the things that was adding a lot of time was the 100 steps that have to get done sequentially. It's just a no-brainer to start to move this stuff efficiently at the same time at once as much as possible. And Congress is going to have an opportunity as the TSCA fee expiration approaching towards the end of September. We would look forward to being able to share our feedback and work with you, Senator, on that.
Yeah, I'm just going to take a couple more seconds to pick that line up. What I'd like to know, and if we don't have time, what priorities should Congress be focusing on so we can improve the program to make sure when we're approving the new TSCA that it's more efficient?
Sure, I will definitely, I'm happy whether it's in QFRs or separately with your office. I'd like to talk to you about Section 21 petitions, like to talk to you about the Section 6 prioritization process. There are a lot of details that could be incorporated in the development of new legislation.
Good. And thanks once again for your attention to Utah's issues.
Thank
I
you,
yield.
Senator.
Thank you. Senator Padilla.
Thank you. I have a question for Senator Curtis. Has he spent much more time in Utah, or as he has spent in California? I appreciate your attention and support for the improvements in and around the Tijuana River, number one. On another positive note, I want to thank you for having worked with local officials, city and county folks, after the fires in the Los Angeles area last January, both the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire. More specifically, they were the largest of the footprint. So the response and the aid in the immediate aftermath was helpful, was good, was necessary. But as you know, there's still disaster aid pending as the communities are trying to rebuild. It's been more than a year. And so I'm wondering if on behalf of the administration, when we might expect that supplemental request for consideration by Congress.
Well, I know, Senator, that there was a meeting that I've heard nothing but positive feedback from both the White House as well as Mayor Bass, County Supervisor Barger. That meeting last week, I would imagine, was felt universally as a good conversation to talk about insurance, to talk about banking, and to talk about potential federal aid. Some of this is a request with FEMA that might not require a new act of Congress. Part of this might be CDBG-DR funding that will require. I believe that the OMB director was in that meeting as well. And I also am under the understanding that there's been follow-up conversations as well.
I hate to cut you off. I do want to get to other issues, but yes, sir, do we have a timetable? I mean, are we weeks, a month?
I don't have a timetable. I've been focused on EPA's budget, but I'm happy to continue to help however possible on any front related to the LA rebuild.
Okay, I appreciate that. Now, turning to another issue or concern of delays, I want to ask for your assistance in finalizing some long-delayed WIFIA loans for California water projects. As you know, WIFIA was initiated in the first Trump administration when it was thought to be better for taxpayers to support communities and projects in the form of loans as opposed to grants. EPA told at least 3 California applicants, the city of Hayward, Las Virgenes, and Valley Water, that their loans were on track for approval on specific dates between 8 and 12 months ago. And as they were approaching those very specific dates that they were given, they were then notified that their applications were postponed indefinitely. So happy to supply you the specifics behind those applications and those projects, but can I count on you to help me get those WIFIA loans finalized and done?
I am happy to check up on that. I'll be in the office tomorrow, and I'll ask our team what the status is.
I appreciate that. And in the last category, in my couple minutes left, as you know, California is no stranger to polluted air. I grew up with it in Southern California, and I know it firsthand. State and local regulators have done everything they can to bring emissions down in every sector within their jurisdiction. The largest area to tackle here are emission sources that are in federal jurisdiction. So we've been working feverishly to try to get the federal government to do its job, or conversely, allow California to continue to push the envelope, as we were able to do through the waivers granted by the Clean Air Act. Authorities that the state of California had but no longer has because they were taken away by the Republican majority in Congress last year in response to this waiver being declared some sort of rule that could be overturned. We can have the CRA debate separately, but what I want to know is, I guess the bigger picture, just to set the tone here, when you came in, you promised the cleanest air in history. Do you believe the air in Los Angeles, the air across the country, is cleaner than when this administration started?
Yes, I've seen over the course of over the last few decades, last couple of decades, we have been
just
trajecting
this last
well.
year, just this last year.
Yeah, primarily, I would give credit to the advancing technology that we've seen across this country and decisions that private actors have made. We've also started approving state implementation plans that were very much backlogged as well, and I believe that that's also part of that process. I would point out, I know this is an important issue with for Senator Kelly and for Senator Curtis, but we took down the guidance on 179B on the international sources of air pollution so that we're not putting an area into non-attainment for sources that are outside of their jurisdiction. California is another example where a lot of the air issues that you're experiencing there are actually coming from international sources. Another topic where even though there might be a conflict and disagreement on other aspects and policy approaches, it's another area we might be able to work together.
No, I certainly hope so. There's a whole playbook there, electrification of our port infrastructure, railroad infrastructure, emerging locomotive technologies that we are happy to support. The hydrogen hub in California, the federal government has defunded while there's been this ample push through the Department of Energy and Department of Interior on fossil fuel sources of electricity, not the renewable sources that California has led on, coupled with battery storage, improving resiliency, bringing down costs, reducing emissions. There's a lot more we can do. We need your support. Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are four things I want to mention, just briefly, Mr. Zeldin. Two, by way of thanks. Thank you for EPA Region 4's help with detection of TCE contamination in the Byhalia area. In the Byhalia area of South Mississippi. Also, very much appreciate EPA's work on Jackson Water. The transfer of $54 million of the operation account was a critical step for something that has been going on for a long time. Also, I want to mention this, and you and I have a difference of opinion on this. And EPA last August issued decisions on small refinery exemptions, SREs, some dating back to 2016. Of course, you were not in office back then. Granting some exemptions, some partial exemptions, and denying some. The statute says that EPA must act within 90 days on getting back with regard to SREs. I hope you can assure us that going forward, you'll be making those decisions in a timely manner.
Senator, that is so very important. As you just pointed out, we inherited a backlog of 175 small refinery exemption requests. So getting through all of them at once last August was a many-month process that started actually the moment that we got in. There have been some new SRE requests that have come in since then that we're working through right now expeditiously. And we want to, we're also starting to work on RFS Set 3 already. So as far as this whole program goes, being able to catch up and have certainty and reliability for you and for your constituents is an important goal.
And so I've got 3 minutes left. Let me just say, I wish that in this room we could acknowledge that there's room for honest disagreements of opinion on the science that we've been talking about today. Senator Whitehouse and I have been friends for almost 2 decades, and there are people in this room that are so convinced of the accuracy of their point of view that they somehow feel that if you disagree, you're up to villainy. I wish we could get away from that. I don't think it's helpful to say that the only reason a decision can be made is to help the president's rich friends or wealthy donors or fossil fuel polluters. And I, at this point, I want to give you the next 2 minutes to say what you were trying to say to a number of questions that you were not given time to respond to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that a lot, Senator. And when predictions are made in the past, science will have a range of the pessimistic to the optimistic. And in order to justify, for example, the 2009 endangerment finding, they were adopting the most pessimistic views of the science. Now, when you get to 2026, great news, you're able to rely on present-day facts in 2026 rather than any bad assumptions from 2009. And just because you take exception when a member of Congress says in January of 2019, then 12 years, the world's about to end, if we're sitting here today saying, well, gosh, it's only 4 years and 9 months left, I don't think the world is about to end, they want to vilify you as if you're denying science. I mean, I just saw a clip yesterday where Al Gore was talking about global freezing. I'm like, I'm having trouble keeping up. I thought it was global warming, and now it's global freezing. And I don't know what kind of I don't know what kind of money is made. You want to talk about making money off of a climate grift? Well, what won't get referenced by your colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle who bring up the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is that the money was going to former Obama and Biden officials. The money was going to Democratic donors. The conflicts of interest that we saw, the amount of self-dealing, the unqualified recipients. Climate United Fund CEO was a special assistant in OMB during the Obama-Biden administration. They received $6.9 billion. If you could go down the list with that entity, you could go through the Coalition for Green Capital about a Biden-Harris climate advisor serving on the board, joining the board in 23 while the organization was applying for GGRF. Power Forward Community CEO of Fannie Mae during the Obama-Biden administration. By the way, if we had 10 more minutes, I could just go through conflicts of interest. They're not offended by that. So we just want to stick to the truth. We want to stick to the science. And if you don't agree with them, you don't follow their logic, well, they'll want to vilify you. But hey, as long as we stay true to these facts, it's good to go. And I'm not going to take morality lessons from people who join all white country clubs.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Ranking Member. I also want to thank Senator Kelly for giving me the time. And thank you, Mr. Administrator, for being here as well. Almost 12,000 schools in the United States are within 1 mile of chemical facilities, and 1 in 3 children go to a school in a chemical zone. Could you talk to us a little bit about what you've done over the past year to address this issue and what you're proposing in this year, your proposed budget to protect children?
Well, it's a really important topic that it has to be considered as a factor when making decisions that are in front of the agency. That there might be a chemical plant that might have some level of fence line emissions, and you have to get the data on that fence line emission. You have to analyze that as far as exposure level. You have to look at what exposure level to that chemical ends up causing adverse health impacts. You have to look at that unreasonable risk to workers, to, as you're pointing out, the general population, to the environment. And then you have to make a decision based on the science, best best available science, and do a complete risk assessment, which is a 4-step process.
I'm glad you mentioned fence line communities. Because I think we maybe had this conversation even in my office a year ago. And I'm really concerned that the data is the point that you mentioned is really necessary. I know that it's my understanding that the EPA has proposed a rollback of the 2024 Safer Communities by Chemical Accident Prevention Rule, which would undercut the risk management practices that make it easier for the public to find out information about chemical facilities in their communities. It's my understanding as well, there was a website, one of your websites, the RMP website, and it had a part of the page that said how to access risk management plan information, really just a way for people to get information. But right now, it says the page is being updated, and it's been that way for a while. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that particular page, but if not today, will you please provide us an update on the page, when you think the page would be back up and running, and how to make sure that these communities can get information?
I'm happy to check on the status of that webpage, and we'll get right back to you.
Okay, thank you. I also believe that it is critical that Americans have this information, that they know the risks, that they know the steps to take to protect themselves. And that's why there's kind of a disconnect. So to the extent that we can, I know we talk a lot about transparency, to the extent that folks can have access to that information, I think it would be a good thing. I also wanted to tack on to the Chairman Capito's remarks about drinking water. Just this week, I had the opportunity to meet with county executives, county council people in my state, and there was a lot of concern that the president's budget eliminates nearly all funding for the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds, the primary source of water infrastructure funding in our country. And your agency estimates a funding gap of $625 billion over the next 2 decades for drinking water infrastructure alone. Wastewater adds another $271 billion. And in my small state, we could lose $90 million in cuts to SRFs. States really can't afford this. That's what they shared with us, and especially when we're talking about rising costs, whether for food or gas or anything else, people can't afford one more higher bill. So I would love to ask for your commitment to working with us to support our state revolving funds.
Yes, absolutely, and we'll make sure that, that we're able to work closely with each of you. This includes, by the way, your congressionally directed spending. Without opining on the merits of any of these individual requests that you make, I will just say that that is the main reason why it hasn't been as revolving as maybe originally intended. But that's something that is very important for us to be able to engage with your office on as far as getting that money out.
Yeah, I think you brought up the congressionally directed spending. I think the good thing about that, it happened while I was in the House, and I think you were in the House at the same time. That was bipartisan. It was a bipartisan decision. We are all making sure that our constituents get the support they need. But this revolving fund, according to the folks in my state and my counties, is crucial. So looking forward to working with you. I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Husted.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Zeldin, I wanted to, first of all, thank you and your team for the work that you've continued to do in East Palestine to help the folks there who are, still monitoring the situation from the train derailment. And you and your team have been fantastic, and so I want to thank you and make sure the people there know that they haven't been forgotten. I also loved the conversation that we have, because we've heard a lot in this committee about energy prices, and from my economics background, I believe that supply and demand really is what drives prices more than anything. If you have high demand and low supply, what's going to happen to the price? It's going to go up. And I also have always been somebody who's believed in an all of the above strategy on energy. If in Rhode Island windmills make sense, great. I know that when I talk with our grid operator in Ohio about solar in January, they said there are some days that it doesn't create anything. There's no energy that comes from it, which means that you can't take days off, so you have to build all of that additional infrastructure to be ready on the coldest day of the year when the sun's not shining. And that's a fixed cost, that whether you have solar or not, you still have to pay for all of that. The ratepayers have to pay for all of it. And so we need, as I understand, more generation to meet supply and demand, more transmission lines, gas pipelines, everything, all of this infrastructure that we all could do as Congress to make it easier, to drive down the prices, make sure people have the kind of energy mix that they want, but we've made it harder because we haven't gotten permitting reform done yet. How important do you believe permitting reform would be to achieving all the goals of the members of this committee?
I think it's a very big opportunity to modernize the Clean Air Act. There's opportunities to Clean Water Act with NEPA and more. And I think that one way to approach negotiations would be to pursue a bill that results in a permitting process that takes less time, costs less money, and has more certainty. And it's very easy to make a good bill bad by injecting one idea that compromises any of those three. We have no shortage of ideas. We'd love to be able to work with this committee in that process. There's a big opportunity with permitting reform, and the Senate EPW committee can absolutely lead the way. And I know how important this is to your chairman.
Yeah. Well, I was taking a look at Ohio's electricity supply the other day, and I saw that during the years of 2000, during the Obama administration, during the Biden administration, we're a state that uses 18 gigawatts of power a day. It's like peak demand. And 11 gigawatts of power were taken off of, shut down during that time period. I mean, talk about creating a supply and demand problem. And I know that we, collectively as a nation aspire to, lower carbon energy outputs to deliver affordable, reliable electricity. But nuclear, how, as we're looking to say, hey, we want to look at nuclear to replace some of these base load operations, how important is permitting reform to getting that accomplished?
It's extremely important. I understand, Ohio is no stranger to nuclear.
Yeah, we have operations enriching, uranium, building small modular nuclear reactors.
And we had a request that came into us to build a small modular reactor in Tennessee that came to us November 24th, and we completed the process on December 1st. Now, at the Biden EPA, that might have taken 3 years. At the Trump EPA, it took 8 days. That we have the power to really slow things down. We also have the power to speed things up. And not to be biased, but there's been a whole lot of, you heard a little bit from Senator Padilla as far as our travels and efforts inside of California, the amount of work with Senator Kelly and the congressional delegation in Arizona on non-attainment issues in Maricopa and elsewhere around the state. There is a great opportunity for EPA to be able to engage with members of this committee to be able to achieve important efficiencies that are available, and that includes on the permitting reform front.
Yeah, well, I just want to conclude by just talking about how important this is, because if we want to do more made in America, make more steel, do more manufacturing, we want to lead in AI and the digital economy, it's going to require more electricity. And the clock's ticking, time is money. If we want to really make things more affordable, we've got to get this accomplished. Thank you for being here.
Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Administrator Zeldin, thanks for being here. I want to discuss rules that limit hazardous air pollution. During your confirmation hearing, you said that the EPA's mission is, and this is a quote, simple but essential to protect human health and the environment, unquote. Now, there can be times, and we discussed this in Phoenix, you just mentioned non-attainment, when the rules and science are a little bit uncertain, and the rule book says some action needs to be taken that may not make sense. I agree, but that's a rare exception. Sometimes the answer is pretty clear-cut. Take what's happening in the town of Miami, Arizona. It's a small mining town about 90 miles east of Phoenix. Freeport-McMoRan, the mining company, operates a smelter there, and this smelter emits 12 tons of lead and 3 tons of arsenic into the surrounding community every year. That smelter is located about a mile from an elementary school, and it's less than a half a mile from a church and a residential neighborhood. Here you can see the elementary school, the swing, that's the smelter in the upper left-hand corner. And we know what lead does to kids. And Mr. Zeldin, I imagine you would not want your kids attending that school. I wouldn't want mine there or going to that church. Accordingly, under EPA's national emission standards, the facility was required to install a pollution control device called a baghouse, and that would reduce toxic lead and arsenic emissions. It's basically just a big vacuum cleaner bag that would cost the mining company, Freeport-McMoRan, about $60 million to install, one-time cost. And that's for a company that had a net profit of $2.7 billion last year. So $60 million, not a drop in the bucket. It's just common sense. that nobody wants their kids breathing in lead and arsenic pollution. I don't think anybody in here would want that. I don't see anybody raising their hands. But Freeport, they don't have to install this baghouse because last fall the company requested and received a presidential exemption from these requirements through a new process that was set up by your EPA where a company could just email your staff and request an exemption. No public process, no one asking the opinions of the parents whose kids go to that school who are breathing in that pollution every day. And Section 112 of the Clean Air Act says that waivers can only be granted if, and this is a quote, the technology to implement such standards is not available and it is in the national security interests of the United States to do so. It's not an either or. Technology not available, national security interests, it has to be both. So to the first requirement, the air pollution control technology clearly exists and has been used for decades, including at the other smelter still operating in the United States. It's in Utah. To the second requirement, somebody could argue the national security connection until you consider that we're talking about here is installing a routine pollution control device that keeps kids from breathing in lead. That's exactly what environmental protections are designed to do. So Administrator Zeldin, given this waiver fails both of the tests that are laid out in the law, and more importantly, fails the basic duty to protect human health, how is that legal?
Well, first off, with regards to Section 112 presidential exemptions, as I'm sure you're well aware, presidential exemptions are made by the president. Our role is to accept the submission and transmit it to the White House. That was the extent of our role consistent with the statute. The White House has publicly posted the proclamations and annexes listing the sources that received exemptions, including the actions on April 8th, July 17th, October 24th, and November 21st of 25. On the bigger topic of lead, it's an extraordinarily important topic as it relates to children's health, as it lead in drinking water, on land, and much more. And the agency takes it extraordinarily seriously, and there's a lot of accomplishments that we're proud of.
Well, here's the thing, though. Your agency created a website specifically to invite companies to fast-track waiver requests. And a FOIA request shows that the company spoke with your staff to coordinate this request. This wasn't just like something for that the president did. Your EPA may not be granting the exemptions, but you went through great lengths to make sure that that was facilitated. So, I mean, this is a mile away from a school. This thing is spewing out 12 tons of lead every single year. The bag costs $60 million. Mr. Zeldin, can I get a commitment from you to fix this? Can you go to the president and say, hey, we made a mistake? I mean, this was not, companies have responsibilities in these communities. Can I get a commitment from you to work with my office, work with the president to undo this?
Just for my own background, because this is the first time we're talking about it, do you know if anyone from your team has raised this to ours before now? Or is this the first time that we're engaging on this topic?
Well, it's the first time we are engaging.
We are.
And we've engaged in other topics.
Plenty of topics.
This is a serious issue for the community in Miami.
I hope that at this point, after all of the many other topics that you've engaged us with, that we've been able to very successfully work together on, I'll just tell you, my role has been on these exemptions to receive and transmit pursuant to the statute. If there's something specific beyond that, it merits a follow-up conversation, but it's not familiar
It wasn't,
I'm not aware of you guys
from what we
reaching
know,
out.
it wasn't just receive. The website was set up. There was coordination with your staff. You provide no recommendation to the White House on this at all?
I transmit and submit.
That's
I
it.
receive and transmit.
But your job is to look out for the health of the American people.
Just following the statute.
But how about the kids that go to that school and people that go to that church? I mean, I would love to have an opportunity to try to solve this problem. It's $60 million to a company that made $2.7 billion. And I'm not saying you specifically. I'm saying this administration, the White House, put the profits of that company over the health of those children.
The only issue is, as I sit here, I don't have I would like to have the information
Okay.
about the company and the technology and
We
the
will-
emissions
we will
that
get
you're
it to you.
talking about, because I'm not, as I sit here, this is the first time that
Okay.
anyone has raised it.
We
but I'm
will,
happy
we
to
will
follow
get
up.
you all the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry the ranking member is here because I'd like him to, because we're going to talk a little bit about some of this stuff. Administrator Zeldin, thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate the good work you've been doing. You and your team have got some great things to recognize, so really appreciate what you've done in the first year. As the chairman knows, I love this committee because we can talk about biofuels, and we're going to do that in a moment. But I also want a chance to talk a little bit about my home state, Nebraska, and power generation, because the ranking member was making a big deal about 9 cents a kilowatt hour for the renewables that he was referencing. Gerald Gentleman Plant in Nebraska is a coal burning plant, and it generates electricity for 3 cents an hour. So by his logic, we should be using coal plants all over the place to be able to generate, because if you're just going to take the cost of kilowatt hour, 9 versus 3, 3 is a third of 9. So it's much less expensive. And I would also point out that Nebraska, according to the EPA, is, you acknowledge that we are maintaining the national ambient air quality standards. So Nebraska's got clean air. One of the other ways we can help clean up the air is with biofuels. Oh, and by the way, we're not like we're all of the above, as I think it was Senator Husted referenced. We're all of the above. We actually, about 30% of our electricity comes from renewable sources, which is much higher than just about any state on the East Coast, including Rhode Island. Rhode Island, I think, is about 12%. So we're all of the above state. But let's talk about biofuels for a moment, because that is something that I care about as well. We've talked about it a lot. Under your leadership, the EPA has done a lot for biofuels, and we have a lot of biofuel wins from your agency. As you've moved to finish some of these things across the line, I commend the EPA for your historic 2026 and 2027 RVOs and for putting forward the highest biomass diesel volumes the program has ever seen. Second, thank you for issuing the temporary emergency waiver to allow for the sale of E15 all year round, and your support for that is evident. We appreciate everything you've done to reduce the cost of living, including actions to allow cheaper E10 and E15. The last time I filled up at the pump with an E10 blend, I was saving about 45 cents a gallon. So Administrator Zeldin, as we work to expand access to more affordable options at the pump, is there anything that is holding up ensuring that these types of actions are realized for all Americans?
The reality, the backstory of, and I appreciate everything you just said as far as the actions that we've taken. I understand how very disproportionate your time and effort. I know you don't have any regret about spending so much time advocating to EPA. You're doing that on behalf of your constituents. It would be easier for you to advocate for other things if you didn't have to be advocating all year long to EPA to get all these different approvals. And I know that, this is a congressional process. There are conversations that are going on, but we have said yes along the way with all these requests that have come in. We inherited that blown deadline on RVOs. We inherited the backlog on SREs. We finished RFS Set 2. We've moved on to RFS Set 3. The problem is that all year long you have to keep coming to us and asking for that next approval. I would love to be able to get to a new reality where you wouldn't have to spend that time making those asks, which you do so passionately for your constituents.
Yeah, so do I. Well, after years of uncertainty, it's encouraging to see the administration that you understand what the RFS was designed to support, which is rural economy and support American manufacturing and strengthen American energy dominance. In Nebraska, we've seen this investment firsthand. My home state is got 2 new soybean processing plants, 2 of the newest in the nation, helping provide stable markets for Nebraska and neighboring states' soybean farmers. And very important at a time when commodity prices are low. This strengthens and anchors Nebraska's communities. It supports good jobs and the farmers who are the backbone of rural America. In addition to supporting our farmers, your support for the import RIN reduction reflects a policy that prioritizes domestic feedstocks. The commitment to implement this reduction beginning in 2028 is a long overdue correction that will help ensure the program rewards American farmers as Congress intended, and will also limit the ability of foreign governments to use our farmers as leverage for political gain. Now we're looking at the next set of RVOs in 2028. Administrator Zeldin, can we expect the 2028 RVOs to be finalized by November 1st according to the statutory deadline?
I would absolutely love for that to happen. As soon as we finished RFS Set 2, we immediately moved on to RFS Set 3. We'll have to put a proposal out. We're also resolving the small refinery exemption requests that have come in since last August. The reality is that when RFS Set 3 is done, we're going to be back on schedule. As far as the exact date of when RFS Set 3 will be done, the goal is as soon as possible. We're working on it right now.
Well, I know that, again, you mentioned already that you had to clear the backlog from the Biden administration, which was like a year late in putting out these RVOs. So I appreciate that you've got a lot of work to do to catch up, but I strongly encourage you to hit the November 1st deadline. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Markey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to Trump's war on Iran, gasoline prices have shot up by $1.20 per gallon and are now above $4.20 a gallon nationwide. That's more than $600 a year for an average American driver. Drivers are feeling Trump at the pump every day. And that feeling is going to be supercharged by your evisceration of the vehicle greenhouse gas emission standards. Now, I'm not going to fight with you today about whether this rollback is legal. I don't think it is. These standards are based on the endangerment finding, which states that the scientific fact that greenhouse gases cause climate change, which endangers our health, and the Supreme Court in Massachusetts versus EPA found that greenhouse gases are air pollutants, and EPA should regulate their dangers through the Clean Air Act, a power you agreed with. You agreed with when you were a member of Congress in 2019.
No, that's not what I
You
said.
voted against any effort to defund enforcement of the endangerment finding. But as EPA administrator, you said last year that you were, quote, driving a dagger into the heart of the climate change religion, a very movie villain way of announcing the foregone conclusion of the endangerment finding review before it was even finished. The only thing that's been changing faster than our climate is your position on it. And I'm also not going to fight with you today about whether the vehicle standards rollback will increase harms from air pollution and climate change, because it will. I'm going to call out the sales fraud that the EPA is committing against the American people by hiding the fact that this rollback is going to hike up costs for drivers, and it's your own regulatory analysis found this rollback is going to increase costs by $180 billion based on projections for future fuel costs that don't even account for Trump's new war on Iran tax at the pump with this dramatic $1.20 a gallon.
Are you going to talk about all the other models that have different numbers?
And that's without even calculating a penny for health or environment costs to Americans. So when Americans hear you talking about trillions in savings and wonder why they still can't pay the bills, why it's more expensive to fill up their tank, or why they're spending more on inhalers and home risk insurance, it's because when the math really gets added up, the cost of these climate and environmental rollbacks comes out of their pockets at the kitchen table. And I'm going to talk a little bit about healthcare costs as well, because when analyzing the standards for dangerous air pollution, the EPA now assigns no value to American lives that would be saved by protection action. Now, you tweeted that this was, quote, fake news, but an EPA spokesperson actually confirmed the reporting, saying that the agency is, quote, not monetizing the impacts on health. This isn't rhetoric. American lives have become literally worthless, a value of zero in the eyes of your EPA. And similarly, on Monday, you said that the health impacts of the EPA's repeal on mercury and toxic air pollution, quote, could be zero. Well, again, the EPA's own analysis from February said that the rollback means more mercury, more arsenic, lead, heavy metals and soot will get into our into our air, into our lungs. That's EPA's conclusion.
Yeah, how much
The
do you
health
think it says
impacts-
that?
The health impacts could be zero.
Wanna talk about it?
If you assign no value to American lives. But I think any worried mom or concerned American would rightfully question whether more mercury, arsenic, and soot in the air could have zero health impacts for their children. So look at who gets counted as valuable by your EPA, Trump's EPA. It's not the kids with asthma. It's not the grandparents with heart disease, but it's big polluters whose costs get counted in your equation, not working Americans, not vulnerable families. Those are the ones who are going to be paying the price for this dagger, this knife that you're bringing to the heart of the protections which have been in place for a generation for our Americans. Yeah, there's a price that's going to be paid, and it's going to be paid for by the health of every family in our country. Thank you, Madam
Filibustering
Chair.
himself.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Administrator Zeldin. I just want to thank you for, I think you're doing a great job. And number one, you're showing respect to my constituents, the people that live in Alaska. And I'm going to get into that on a whole host of issues. First, by showing up. Remember, you, during your confirmation hearing, you said you're going to come to Alaska a number of times, not just in July, but you want to come when it's cold and dark as possible.
That's true.
And you were in Fairbanks, Alaska in February, and I think it was 30 below zero, and it's dark.
My toes are just starting to thaw out.
So thank you for that. And thank you for listening to my constituents. You know, Emma Polkin is doing a great job at Region
is.
10, so thank you for hiring her. This, of course, I've shown this many times. The previous administration didn't listen to my constituents. That's the last frontier lockup. What is that? Next slide there. That's the 70 executive orders, 7-0, from the Biden administration, singularly and exclusively focused on Alaska. We didn't ask for them, we didn't want them, and you're helping get us out from underneath that. Why does that matter? Let me get the next slide. I'm not sure that's going to fit. So I've shown this before too. You know, Senator Markey's talking about life. This is really important to me. All my colleagues in the Biden administration that want to shut down the economy of Alaska, resource development in Alaska, they forget about this chart. In a quick nutshell, you've seen it before, Mr. Administrator, but it's really important to show it. When people have the ability to have a strong economy, to develop their resources responsibly, as they have in the North Slope of Alaska, in the northwest northwest Arctic Borough in Alaska, not on the Aleutian Island chain, they live longer, a lot longer. My constituents from 1980 to 2014, life expectancy went up almost by 13 years. Nothing more important than that. And so when you're out there and you're seeing it, the work you're doing, it actually helps save lives. So I appreciate it. And that's what's happening in my state. So just last weekend, I was in Wasilla, Alaska, visiting a veteran-owned diesel mechanic shop that was raided, SWAT-style, 30 EPA agents by the Biden administration with this young man who's now a convicted felon, not because he put anyone at risk, because he was keeping essential diesel vehicles running in the unforgiving cold conditions of my state. We had a hearing here. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that hearing on my bill relating to this, but you've already taken administrative action, Mr. Administrator, on this death issue where essentially an Obama administration regulation shuts down diesel engines at 12 degrees, which is a balmy day in Alaska. The hearing was very powerful because it showed the giant risk to lives and safety because of that. Can you give me an update on where you are on that important issue? I know you heard about it in Fairbanks, but it's not just an Alaska issue. It's any place that's got cold weather.
Absolutely. Last August at the Iowa State Fair, along with Small Business Administrator Kelly Loeffler and Secretary Rollins, Senator Ernst, we announced a significant reversal of the deratements through new EPA guidance. In February, we sent out demand letter for information to 14 engine manufacturers on their warranty data so that we can rely upon that information for future decisions. We also issued out right to repair guidance so that farmers and others can be repairing their own farm equipment. That's part of this package of DEF actions. The president recently announced new actions on DEF. EPA guidance got rid of the DEF sensors, no longer required. And now we're moving on to our 2027 NOx proposal, which, as of now, we are intending to propose to completely eliminate all deratements. We were heard from the haul truckers of Alaska. We're considering their feedback, not just with diesel exhaust fluid, but specifically with the filters. Their insight has been incredible. Your staff was with us in Fairbanks while you're doing your job, and it was a very good visit. We will not forget the haul truckers. We will not forget how important this issue is in Alaska, and quite frankly, I'm sure you wouldn't let us forget.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I'll tell you, you got truckers, but ambulance drivers, firefighters in Fairbanks, they wrote a letter as part of our testimony. Another quick issue so you're listening, and we appreciate that, Mr. Administrator. I want to just very quickly, the WOTUS rule as it relates to clear, predictable boundaries for landowners, project developers, particularly in my state. As you know, over half of all wetlands in America are located in Alaska, but I know you've worked to clarify that, particularly as it relates to permafrost, which is a big issue. Is that something you're going to finalize soon? And again, thank you for listening to the unique aspects of Alaskans who have big challenges with that rule.
Senator, we heard you loud and clear, heard from other Alaskans loud and clear. It's been great to see permafrost, not just in June, but also in the middle of the winter. We're definitely taking your advocacy strongly into consideration, reviewing the public comments and preparing a final decision.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Zeldin, you came out to Southern California to observe the Tijuana River crisis. I appreciate that. I had an early meeting with Commissioner Chad McIntosh, and he was hopeful that we might achieve the goal of 50 million gallons a day expansion for the South Bay treatment plant by 2027, which was an accelerated timetable, which made Californians very encouraged. But I read an article recently in the Coronado News that stated that the IBWC recently told the San Diego Regional Water Quality Control Board the timeline for achieving that 50 million gallons a day expansion may slip from 2027 now to 2030. The administration had also said it would achieve an additional expansion to 75 million gallons by 2031. I wanted to ask if you're aware of this slippage. Is that accurate?
It's not accurate. I'm aware of the story, and I saw it. I asked the questions before today, and they are committed to slashing that timeline. I was told rather confidently that that was not accurate when that one staffer said 2030.
So you think we could still meet the 2027 goal?
That is what I am being told. I'm going to make sure that we're staying on top of it, but the question I asked about the 2030 was strong pushback that was not accurate. And as far as whatever is needed from EPA, whatever might need to be communicated to Congress or elsewhere inside of the executive branch, we want to make sure that big project is done. Now, as you're well aware, last summer we expedited the 2-year timeline to get the expansion to 35 done in 100 days. And that was great that we were able to ramp it up to 35 as quickly as we can. Getting this next part done is going to be important in order to achieve a permanent solution, a 100% solution to the Tijuana River sewage crisis.
Do you think there's an opportunity ahead of us that we can use the July 2025 MOU that you negotiated with Mexico and the Minute 333 agreement? Is there an opportunity with USMCA to get any further guarantees or put in any further safeguards to make sure that Mexico expends the resources it is committed to addressing its part of this problem?
So this is a really important point that I've been asked from the beginning. My first trip to the San Diego area as administrator was April of last year. MOU was agreed in July. The minute was agreed this past December. Since the MOU was signed, and especially since the minute was signed, we have been tracking every Mexico side obligation and project. They have been they've been obligating the money that they said they were going to obligate on time, and they're doing the projects that they said that they were going to do on time. We are staying on top of it daily, and I have not a single blown deadline to report. So I've been asked the whole time, like, about the stick, because the way I was communicating the entire time sounded a lot like a carrot, like we want to work with Mexico to get this resolved. And Mexico, the Sheinbaum administration, and Alicia Bárcena was communicating their interest in making it their top priority, and it was their first agreement between the Sheinbaum administration after President Trump was sworn back in. But as long as they're meeting those obligations, I don't want to communicate that we need an additional stick. However, what you are referencing as it relates to future negotiations, I am very confident that at any point, if there is a slippage, that other options will be considered.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for any effort you can make to try to keep us on track with a problem that's gone on way too long. Let me turn to a different subject matter. Administrator, when you testified before the committee last year, as well as in your written responses, you were adamant that EPA conducted a, quote, individualized review of every single one of the hundreds of grants that EPA canceled. A great many were in California, but a great many were in other states as well. You told the committee in response to Senator Whitehouse's questioning, I conducted an individual review of everything. You told House Energy and Commerce Committee, quote, I was the one who made the decision. I made the decision after doing an individual review of every grant specifically. And I sent a question for the record in which you responded, EPA terminated grants on an individualized basis. So my question is, these grant cancellations are being challenged in court. Recently, Judge Richard Gergel of the U.S. District Court in the District of South Carolina ruled that EPA likely violated the Administrative Procedures Act because EPA, quote, failed to produce a single document showing any individualized review of plaintiffs' grants. So my question is, do you stand by your testimony that you did an individualized review of all of the grants?
1,000%. And actually, on these the litigation cases, while I'm not allowed to talk about individual litigation, what I can reference is, because Senator Whitehouse pointed to it when we were here last year, there are declarations that were submitted. Now, Senator Whitehouse only pointed to one declaration of one case while ignoring the other declarations of that case, as well as all the other declarations of all the other cases. I would point you to the declarations submitted by career staffers who were involved in the individualized review, the other staffers of the other declarations of political appointees who were part of that process for individualized reviews. Every single grant went through an individualized review. I was reviewing a sheet that had everything individualized on it when making those decisions.
Then why was that sheet provided to the court? Why would the court find if that was the case?
There are judges every single day across this country that reach decisions that show that.
So was this information provided to the court?
I can't speak to.
Let me just ask this
anything
last
beyond
question.
the declarations. However, I would imagine
it
was.
Will you provide that documentation to this committee showing the individualized review?
Sure. It's the document. If it's not part of what was submitted to the court, which I don't know why it would have been.
You'll submit it to the committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd be surprised. I'm actually looking at something that was submitted to the court that looks pretty darn individualized.
Well, as long as you're committed to submitting it to this committee, I will yield back.
Yeah, I have it right here.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator Sullivan has asked, and I'm going to grant his request and give him another 2.5 minutes for question.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Administrator. I want to follow up on an issue you and I have talked about. It's an issue that I'm very passionate about. You've done a great job on this. This is the issue of water and sewer for communities in Alaska. We still have over 30 communities in my state that don't have running water or flush toilets. A lot of people in America would be surprised by that. We're the richest country in the world, and we have these communities. You've seen a number of them. By the way, some of the most patriotic communities in the country, because Alaska Natives serve at higher rates in the military than any other ethnic group in the country, and yet we still have places in my state that people don't have basic running water. That's one of the reasons why when there is development, you see a great increase in life expectancy. So can you commit to continue to work with me and this committee on drinking water in wastewater infrastructure programs, particularly in rural Alaska, making that a top priority? The EPA does have some good programs. Sometimes they're a little bit encumbered in red tape to get the money out, but I'd like to get your commitment to continue to work with me on that. It's a very important issue for me.
Absolutely, Senator. The Alaska Rural Native Village Infrastructure Program awarded $40 million FY25 to 14 different projects serving 1,700 Alaskan homes. We anticipate $39 million for the program in FY 2026 to be able to maintain the current level of wastewater and drinking water infrastructure. And just this past Friday, we announced $90 million to strengthen water infrastructure for tribes and rural communities, which will go to support small rural and tribal communities, the communities that you have long championed.
Great, thank you. That's a great answer. And then finally, somewhat related, this is another issue we've worked on. I think you've seen it firsthand in Alaska. In 1971, Congress passed the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, what we call ANCSA, which conveyed 44 million acres of land, federal land, that's the size of North Dakota, to the Alaska Native people. The largest land settlement probably, certainly in America, but probably in the history of the world, for Native people, to Alaska Native regional corporations and village corporations to settle the Aboriginal land claims of the Alaska Native people. Very, very historic, very successful, but a lot of these lands, over 1,100 sites that were transferred by the federal government, were polluted. So the feds send the Alaska Native people, here's your land, you owe it in fee simple, which is great, but a lot of it was contaminated. And we've worked hard on this committee in a bipartisan way. Believe it or not, certain EPAs, not you guys, then went to these Alaska Native corporations and said, hey, we're gonna sue you under CERCLA to clean up your land. And they were like, wait, you gave us the polluted land. So this committee fixed that. They're no longer liable under CERCLA. The fact that the EPA even contemplated them being liable under CERCLA was crazy. I did notice that the Contaminated ANCSA Lands Assistance Program in the President's budget this year was fully funded, so I want to thank you on that. But can you continue, again, to work with me and this committee on this issue, which is, you know, a real injustice, right? Here's the land, Alaska Native people. Oh, by the way, it's fully polluted, so you can't use it. And so we need the help with the feds, not just in funding, but creative ways that we've talked about, maybe, you know, mitigation banks and other approaches that could help bring the private sector in to help cleaning up these lands. But the land kind of sits unused, of course, because it's polluted, and that certainly wasn't the part of the bargain that the Native people of Alaska thought they were getting when we passed this historic legislation in 1971.
Yeah, Senator, thank you for making sure that this always is a top priority for Region 10. We are working with the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, plus 10 Alaska Native entities on 11 projects, currently estimated to total $24 million in cleanup work. We're actively working on several projects for funding in 2026, as well as in 2027, and we're continuing to streamline our process. EPA, as well as Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, and Alaska Native Village Corporation Association are continuing to provide support to Alaska Native entities through fieldwork, site planning, and proposal development. In total, we're aware of the approximately 1,200 contaminated sites identified on lands conveyed through the federal government. and we look forward to continuing to work with you now and into the future on this.
Great. Well, I appreciate the cooperation. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be home in a couple of days. Saturday night is the big annual fundraiser for the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. You just mentioned them. They do great work on this. They do great work on the water and sewer issues we just talked about, so I'll pass on the greetings. But again, thank you for listening to my constituents. These are very unique challenges, but when the federal government's helping them, you get this. You get people who live longer. And I asked my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, give me a policy indicator of success more important than the people you represent are living longer. And I think the answer is there isn't one. That's more important than anything. And you're helping in that regard, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Administrator. There's no further questions. I would certainly like to thank you for being here this afternoon and for your candid answers and very informative answers, and all of my colleagues who have since left us for their participation in today's hearing. Senators who wish to submit written questions for the record have until 5 p.m. on Wednesday, May 13th to do so. The witness responses to these questions are due back to this committee no later than 5 p.m. on Wednesday, May 27th, and will be submitted for the record. Before the hearing adjourns, I would like to ask the folks in the audience to remain seated until the administrator and his staff have exited the hearing room. I would certainly appreciate that cooperation. And with that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.